Hey, Patrick Findoro here, co-founder at Vetted Biz. Very excited to have on John Keene, who's the co-founder of ServiceMinder. They're about to celebrate their 10th anniversary, and they're the dominant platforms for home service franchises in the United States. So, John, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Patrick. It's great to hang out with you.
So you're almost on your 10th year of your platform business. I'm sure you've just have learned a crazy amount from your clients across all these different home service brands. How did you even get into this space and developing software and a platform for home service franchises?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those unusual stories that's best told in a bar. But so late '90s, I had co-founded a company with some friends of mine, a company called E2 Communications, and our focus then was kind of small and medium business marketing automation. So kind of email, CRM type stuff. The first version of the product was basically an enterprise platform sale to work with like all the guys using Palm Pilots and Act and kind of all that stuff. So I'm definitely dating myself in terms of my technology background. Anyway, so we started out with that as our mission statement. Then as we were approaching Y2K, all of our kind of target audience customers that wanted to use us, which is mostly like marketing and sales folks at major enterprises, were like, yeah, the IT guys won't install this stuff because they don't know whether the lights are going to come on January 1 or not. So come back after that. And we're like, well, we're out of money. We need to like do some
Yeah,
stuff.
you need
So we
money.
pivoted. Yeah, so we pivoted and became basically a SaaS-based product. So it was us and Salesforce
SaaS
back
wasn't that
then.
popular at the time.
No, no. So of course, it was us and Salesforce, and you can see how that turned out. They kind of won that race. But so then we kind of went through that whole .com boom bust cycle. Then towards the end, when the .com market crashed, that company was in a situation where needed a lot more money, couldn't get more money. So I ended up going through a bankruptcy. Was bought through an asset sale. So I ended up staying on with the company that bought us out of bankruptcy for another few years. And then around 2005 or so, I said, okay, I'm ready for something completely different. What could I possibly do? And so I said, well, I'm going to buy a landscape lighting franchise. So I
Okay.
did that, opened that in 2006. You can start to see where some of these dates are significant, right? Had a great launch, great market. The Dallas market was basically all mine, and a land of opportunity until 2008 rolls around, and selling high end, landscape lighting systems to people who are now upside down on their equity. Not a good
Not the
market.
top priority.
Exactly. And that market that industry has kind of a maintenance revenue component to it, and that was kind of the goal, is to kind of build it up, and then you could weather kind of whatever storms come through kind of the ongoing maintenance revenue. Didn't quite get to that scale in time, so at the end of the 5 years, tried to sell, wasn't able to do that either. So basically said, see you later, and said, now what? So I ended up kind of looking back at those two previous events. The iPad had just come out in 2010. We had a tool that we used at the brand that I was with, and as a technology guy, all I could look at it was like, man, we could add so much stuff to this, which would make it so much more useful. And that was a turnkey enterprise thing. They wrote a big check for somebody that wrote it, and so none of that was ever going to happen either. So I said, that's the opportunity. So we basically started building a platform to focus on kind of the small and medium independent home services operators. A big part of what we wanted to try to solve was automating scheduling and client communication as a part of that. So leads would come in, we could integrate with call centers so they could take the calls, book the appointments live on your calendar. So if you're under a sink fixing a leak, right, your phone's going to go to the call center. They're going to figure out where the appointment is, right? They're going
Especially
to route it.
Americans, we like responsiveness.
Exactly. I mean, that's very much
Reply, forget it. There's someone else.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, that was very much back in the day of, and it still is to this day to a certain extent, right? If you answer the phone and book the appointment, you win, right?
Yeah.
It's usually how that works, right? And that was still very much back in that same day. And so the mission was really, how do we make these small guys present bigger than they were, right? So phone always gets answered. You book an appointment, you get a confirmation. When you're on the way, you get a text message. Take online payments. That was kind of where we started. And that was
So this is
2000.
helping the sales side of the business
Exactly.
getting it done, and then also servicing the client, not having to
Exactly.
waste necessary administrative task. Hey, are you coming? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. So that was kind of the niche, and you could run all that from basically an iPad in the field. And the call center integrations were a big part of that initial
I
model as
imagine
well.
like finding these independent professionals was kind of a pain, and like trying to
Yeah,
acquire that customer?
Exactly. Yeah. So we would advertise like on, Capterra, G2 software advice, buy the leads, do the demos, and then go, oh, okay, here's the 19 things we got to go build this week to get ready for the next demo. So that's kind of what we did for the first 2 or 3 years, right? Lots of demos, lots of features, lots of ideas. We didn't focus on a particular industry. We're focusing on the recipe,
Did you
right?
raise capital? Like, how were you
No.
surviving during this time?
So I had landed through some friends that were at E2, a software development contract. So I hired guys to go work on that. So I kind of managed that during the day. Then my co-founder and I, would code nights and weekends on this, support the customers. And that was kind of what the first couple of years was like.
And then how did you come across, like, when did you think about, oh, I was a franchisee once, like,
Yeah.
let's
So
see if
actually,
I can scale?
yeah. When we shipped 1.0, I called them and said, "Hey, got a cool tool. You should check it out. It's much better than what we were using before." And they said, "Yeah, we're gonna do something else." It's like, okay, that's fine. So we'll just kind of stay the course that we're on. And then I don't know, maybe like a year after we had launched, they came back and said, "Okay, the other idea was wrong. We're not going to do that. Let's, how quickly can we get our brand on your platform?" And at this point, we were not focused on franchising at all. It was literally just anybody in home services, right? That was the kind of $1 billion market. If you could get, if you can get 1% of $1 billion market, you're going to be great, right? And so we started the process of onboarding them. And as through that exercise, it was like, okay, so here's all the things that a franchise needs to be able to manage a brand of locations that are all the same. So that took about a year to kind of go through that process of getting them up and running and kind of fill in the feature gaps that they needed to run their business. We then did another brand shortly after that was in a different industry. And by the time we finished that second one, so we're now up to kind of 2014, 2015 or so, that's when the light bulb, no pun intended, finally went on, right? It's like, oh, so we need to build a product that focuses on these guys. They'll then solve the problem of how do you get 100, landscape lighting contractors on a platform. The franchise is going to make sure they all kind of follow the same processes, same products, same communications, right? So then in 2015 is kind of when we made the pivot and said, okay, we're focusing on franchising. And then we've been kind of slowly rolling along ever since then.
And who's your ideal, like, first point of contact? Like, do you want to be speaking to the president of the franchise brand or like a top performing franchisee?
It varies. Typically, our approach is kind of what we call a top-down selling model, right? So we try to, we want to talk to the franchisors, right? And so the target audiences there are, CEOs, great, but if it's a large brand, he's not that, or she, right, is not that. He's going to delegate or she's going to delegate to somebody else, right? So it's going to be, the people who are head of operations, because we can make their life much simpler, and also the head of marketing, because we can now, with all the data that's coming in and all the transactional activity, right, we can give a much clearer picture of kind of how the marketing dollars are producing from their perspective. So those are the two people who typically get the most excited about our platform. If it's a small brand, that may all be the CEO, but for
That's
bigger
well
brands,
said.
it's
Yeah,
other
from
people.
the marketing standpoint, especially as it's changing so fast,
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
what Facebook might have worked before, but now people
exactly.
are putting content. Like, if the head of marketing is like putting their neck on the line, but
Yeah,
if they don't have
yeah.
like data to back up their choice, then if that doesn't work, then they're screwed. They could be out of a
Yeah,
job.
we provide some out of the box ways to kind of create some accountability between the marketing and the outsourced marketing agencies, right? And the end results that you're looking at, right? Because the agency is saying, here's all the clicks we generated for you, here's all the leads we generated for you, but that's all we know, right? And on our side, we can correlate those, right? Because especially when leads come in from a digital channel, we know, UTM tags or channels and campaigns or tracked phone numbers or whatever, right? We can tie those leads back to where they came from. And so we also know, did they get an appointment? Did they get a proposal made? Did they buy? Right. And so now we can show things like, revenue broken down by channel and campaign, conversion rates by channel and campaign, average ticket, cost per lead. We have a way to track, campaign budget spends down to the franchisee level. And so you can use all that data to then show things like, oh, we spend at the brand level, average of $200 per lead. The close rate is 60%, and the average ticket is $10,000. And so that becomes the brand metrics, and then franchisees can kind of rank,
And are
where
you
they
doing
fall.
much benchmarking? Like, is the head of marketing or even the brand president for some of the smaller franchise organizations, like, are they saying, "Hey, John, does this make sense? Like, our click through rates this, and our customers get a call back in such and such time"?
Typically not as much. I mean, they'll bring us in to kind of help make sure they can measure what they want to measure. But by and large, these guys know what they think. We're providing either the raw data to validate what they think, or we're providing a way to make it less frictioned, right, to get those numbers, right? Because if you're in a situation where you're pulling data from your marketer, pulling data from a CRM, pulling data from royalty reports, pulling data from call centers, now you fire up Excel, right? Multiple tabs, VLOOKUPs, got all those things. And then 7 days later, you say, I know what our cost per lead is, $200. Or you can just use it all in Service Minder and just know that
Yeah, we
number.
were chatting before we hit record, and like that's something that we're working with Vetted Biz, where there's data that we can pull from an API, and like there's a
Yep.
flow, and then there's documents that we can scan super easily, and we know it's going to be like 99.9% correct. But
Yep.
then depending on the data source, you are dealing with Excel, so it's like how do we avoid that and like have
Yeah.
the systems all
And
integrated?
think of all the friction that goes on in doing all that, right? So now if you're a small brand, for example, or an emerging brand, you don't have the bandwidth to do any of that. If you're a large brand, maybe you can throw money at the problem, but you're throwing money at the problem, and it's
And do
not
you
necessarily
see
solving it.
any like key traits of like your top performing clients, like what data that you're providing that they're focusing on to
That's
really get
interesting.
their
Yeah,
franchisees more
it's
profitable?
it's funny. You think there would be a lot of and there probably is a fair amount of consistency in terms of the stuff that they look at across the board. Revenue is king. Conversion rate is pretty high as well, both at the kind of appointment stage as well as at the buy stage. Those are kind of two metrics that most people tend to look at. Beyond that, they've kind of all got just kind of be either based on their industry or and whether they're a recurring business model or project oriented or kind of one-off service type things, right? Because we have brands that are kind of run all of those gamuts, right? Um, and so some of them may watch, how many recurring customers do we have, or what's our retention rate year over year, or whatever. So, in fact, to kind of solve some of those challenges, we also offer Tableau as a service,
Okay.
right? So you can basically, we'll set up basically the data warehouse, load all your data into it, manage and administer all of the Tableau licensing and all the things that go along with that. Franchise can then go in and design KPIs and dashboards and reports that's all pulling live Service Minder or near live Service Minder data. And now they can truly drill down to the benchmarks that they really care about that are unique for their industry or unique for their brand that we may add at some point. But again, we're trying to be an industry agnostic tool, like one that can serve all the home services industries. And so there may be certain metrics that are unique to your particular industry segment that we may never get to. And so Tableau is a great way to kind of bridge that gap for them. And it's pretty, so everybody likes
Yeah,
that.
no, definitely. I've seen the visualization. It's easy. It's also easy to share like internally in
Exactly.
terms
Yeah.
of
And so a
visual.
franchisee can log in, right? They go to the Tableau section and it's all embedded inside Service Minder. So they never have to log out and leave, right? It's just another tab inside Service Minder and they can click on whatever these reports are. And it's smart enough that it can say, I'm going to compare, top half is going to be brand data and bottom half is going to be your data in comparison. And you can compare, we can break down cohorts based on geographies, for example, right? Northeast, Northwest, Midwest, whatever. Right? You can create those kind of structures as well as comparing variabilities by product mix and all that kind of stuff as well.
It's interesting you brought up like the recurring revenue type of brands where they
Mm-hmm.
have the same customer and they're
Right.
providing maid services
Yeah,
or
we call that
oil.
the MAID model, even though there's lots of other things that fit into that. Everybody understands what the MAID model is, right? Please keep coming
Every
back
week,
until I tell you to
every other
stop.
week it's coming, and then you have the
Yep.
other one where it's probably a higher margin, like
Mm-hmm.
flooring installation. But how often
Yeah.
is someone doing flooring installation?
Exactly. Or it's outdoor construction, or it's paint contracting, or some form of remodeling, right? Kitchen, bath, whole house, windows, doors. Those are all kind of what we call the project oriented, right? Where you're selling, a 10, 20, $50,000 project to a consumer. And so, we have kind of all the tools to kind of help support, the nurturing processes and there's e-signatures and, change orders and kind of all that stuff is there for those guys. But then on the flip side, if you're doing something that's more on the recurring side, it's very easy to set them up. Say this recurs every 3 weeks, and they can accept a proposal and turn on the service, and kind of do all those things.
And is there another bucket, or are those really kind of the two buckets of like kind of client types?
Well, the third bucket is kind of more like a project, just smaller projects, right? So, like tile jobs, right, or landscape
Okay.
design, or
So
whatever,
the
right? So
sales
it's
pipeline and the metrics that collecting are going to
correct.
be different.
I need my garage door fixed, right? So that's not recurring. It's not a project. Don't need a Gantt chart, right? Just need you to come and I'll pay you $50 or $200
There's
to
no
replace my garage
measuring.
door
It's
opener.
just like one thing and you're done.
Exactly. Single wide or double wide. That's all I need to know. You want red or white. So it's still simpler type stuff, but the bigger the ticket, the more the ability to kind of automate and streamline the conversion process with the clients through communication by texting, by email, multiple salespeople, whatever. That's a kind of a different part of the animal than just my garage door won't open. Please come fix it.
So on our podcast and YouTube channel, there's a good amount of suppliers that are also listening, and you've been
Yeah.
at this for 10 plus years, and you also have the unique experience of actually have been a franchisee. Are there any best practices that you'd be comfortable sharing? Like, all right, you have the relationship with the decision maker, the franchisor who's making the purchase decision, but then rolling that out to like the users, the
Yeah.
franchisees. Because I've heard a lot of people having issues and like getting buy-in.
Yeah. So there's kind of two different dimensions to that, right? One is, even though like we've done this enough now that we tell everybody this is a hard project. This is going to take a lot of work. There's going to be gnashing of teeth. There may be crying, right? But it's not going to be a weekend decision and exercise, right? This is an enterprise level project. Are you in or not, right? And so that certainly kind of shapes out kind of what the top level side is about. There's planning, data mapping, data migrations. There's just a lot, integrations, right? They may need us to talk to platforms that we don't currently talk to, so we have to go add those, or whatever. So that's kind of one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is then how do you get the franchisees to get engaged and how do you get them to use it? And there's always kind of the carrot stick model, right? What's the stick? Well, the FDD says you must use the tool we tell you to use, therefore you're going to use the tool we tell you to use. And maybe you're switching from platform A that the brand was currently on, and we're going to turn that off, and you're going to be on platform B, which is ServiceMinder, right? So those are kind of more stick type approaches. And not all brands are set up to do that, right? Not all brands charge a technology fee or whatever. It's kind of everybody kind of do their own thing, and that's a lot of times that's why they come to us in the first place, is because they want to solve some of those problems. And so what we try to focus on on the franchisee side is where can we insert ourselves to optimize their workflow, right? What I call the home services recipe, right? Like making the phone ring, booking the appointments, creating proposals for a client, making them engaging so the customer can pay easy and accept, scheduling job, communicate, get paid, rinse and repeat. Like what are the things that we can do to optimize that cycle? And that's really kind of what we've always focused on since when we started, even before the franchising world. And so, if you're a franchisee and you're using ServiceMinder, there's a bunch of things the brand is going to go do for you that you need to worry about, right? Like leads coming in from the website or any other marketing activities. Those are going to flow into your ServiceMinder account automatically. If the brand has a call center, the call center will be able to talk and schedule and book and work live in your calendar, or if they use an external call center. We have the ability to do brand level email campaigns, right? So the brand can wake up and say, hey, we're going to do a special for all the franchisees, customers who've been invoiced in the last 2 years. The brand can go execute and launch that campaign. Franchisees can look at it and opt out if they want to. And then because we're not only delivering the emails and the content, but we're also measuring the results from that email, right? We know who got it. So when they buy something, we know that. So we can show them on a dashboard, hey, here's the campaign that ran. It went to 800 contacts and you made $17,000. And then you get into the royalty side, right? It's like when you're going to the end of the month, you're doing paperwork or whatever. I mean, some brands are flat fee, some brands are, are revenue based or whatever. Yeah. And so if it's a percentage of revenue, right? Nobody wants to go through and do the math in a spreadsheet, right? And so
especially
running
for
everything
jobs that they're getting, like, yeah, it must be a nightmare in terms of if they have like a lot of different product offerings or just
exactly, yeah, different royalty rates for different services, right? Residential versus commercial, or national accounts versus local accounts or whatever. So there's just all sorts of different varieties. We try to incorporate those into kind of our ability to do the month-end reporting stuff. And so you turn into to do the end of month report is submit a button, and then you have the benefit of the brand. They become experts in ServiceMinder as well to support the franchisees. So you have somebody who not only knows the product very well because they're in it every day, but they also know your business very well. Like we know the product very well, and we might know some aspects of your business, but get me on a demo with a new industry, and I can go in like 3 words, and then I'm out of like I know everything. I can tell you 3 words about Windows, and that's it. And once I've done that, I'm done. So, the ability to speak in their terms and understand, their flow, and then to have all the data that we have available that manages those process, those create ways to kind of measure their engagement and help them find things to pay attention to or techniques that other locations will use. Because you can have somebody who uses something in ServiceMinder that's knocking it out of the park, and they're just using maybe a drip marketing automation thing or something, or a certain kind of messaging. Well, now that that's proved out as well, the franchisor can help migrate that to everybody, right? Point, click, deploy this to all the accounts, and now everybody can gain the benefit of
And his
that word
click-through
knowledge.
rate was, 42%.
Exactly. And what did he do
42%
differently? Yeah, what did he do differently that everybody else was doing, right? And so you get that. That's a big part of the benefit of a franchise system, is that community, right? You're not going and figuring all this stuff out on your own. You're in a brand with a bunch of other people who are just like you, trying to solve the same thing, and there's kind of that mutually beneficial relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. It's symbiotic, right? They both are trying to.
It seems like it's the franchisor's responsibility to really facilitate that communication
Correct.
flow. And if it's backed by data, I mean, that's going to be a lot better and
Exactly.
beneficial.
Exactly. And that's really what drove our transition to the franchise market was, if like we have franchisees who own other businesses outside the franchise, and some of them will want to run those businesses inside ServiceMinder as well, so they can share resources and knowledge and all that stuff. And so we have kind of that component of the business, which is a very small percentage of our overall business. If you Google and find us and you decide we're the tool for you, we kind of tell you up front, like, there's a lot here, right? This is not just like, Jobber or, a tool like that, which it's a very basic flow functionality. The level of things that you can do inside it's a platform, right? So, the individual owner operators are probably never going to use more than 10% of it, just because they don't have the time and the bandwidth to go figure that out. The benefit of a franchise is that they are investing time and effort to learn how to maximize the value of the tool, and they can then share that knowledge with their franchisees, which then, rising tide lifts all boats. So.
And they can learn together. It's like a lot of these SaaS companies, they have like a community forum, and it's usually other people in the community that are solving the issues.
Exactly. Yeah. So we see a lot of that as well. In the world of franchisees, right, there's a bell curve of, skill levels, like some people are coming in with a sales background, some people are coming in with, kind of the service delivery background or a marketing background. They can all find things that they can take advantage of, both within the community of their franchise, but also within ServiceMinder, and can help share that knowledge.
So franchisees, I mean, you can essentially drive more revenue, limit admin expenses, and probably with this labor crunch that we're having right now, I don't know how it is in Texas, but Florida, it's tough to find employees.
Yeah, you can hear that quite a bit. Yeah,
you can save on headcount and optimize labor cost.
Yeah, I think a big part of the attraction that we have on the franchising side is just kind of the level of automation and the level of capability kind of in one solution. So you're not having to piece together a bunch of things. And anytime you start piecing stuff together, you're introducing friction, right? Maybe it all just works until, somebody changes something and then it stops working, right? And so, we try to.
Do you have a relationship like at the owner level, like if it's an umbrella brand or a private equity fund that owns like a bunch of concepts, do you have a relationship at that level at times that they can be like, okay, we need to deploy this. We just bought this franchise.
It's a funny story. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things we've learned over the last few years is, every business wants to grow, right? So everybody with business wants to advertise and generate leads to grow, and we're no different. But after trying a bunch of different things for 3 or 4 years, we learned that nobody's searching for us. Most people don't know we exist because they don't know what to search for if they did. So we're largely a word of mouth business, right? And so people learn about us because somebody told them, hey, go check out ServiceMinder, or a franchisee is on the platform and they buy a franchise in another concept and say, hey, you guys should check this out. Or a PE firm buys a brand that's on ServiceMinder. They happen to buy 4 other brands and say, hey, we should run this on all the brands. Right? So
they have a more long-term approach where they're going to hold on to that franchise brand 5 to 7 years. So they don't mind that it's not a weekend job.
Exactly.
All right. Well, it's going to take a year, 2 years. It's an investment of time and money.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I said early on, right? This is not a weekend project, right? This is a lot of work when you engage it. And the bigger the brand, the more effort required to involve. So, you have to realize that it's an investment, so that you can see the return, and it can take a while to do that, especially for larger brands.
How do the best franchisees get onboarded fast and
Yeah.
really benefit from your platform?
When you have the opportunity to engage in a platform, whether it's ServiceMind or anything else, the franchisor will more than likely give you the opportunity to get access and play with it early. Do that.
Okay.
Right? The sooner you get involved is the sooner that you can A, get a jump on learning, but B, you can also provide feedback. Like our onboarding process is very interactive and iterative, because we're not custom building anything, right? It's a product, and there's checkboxes and drop downs to control how it behaves. And maybe through that onboarding process, we discover some new checkboxes we got to go add, or some new drop downs we have to add. So that's kind of the normal course of things, and we try to discover those as soon as possible. But it's basically, we start with a brand and say, okay, let's set up your workflow inside ServiceMinder. Let's play test it, right? And then let's bring in the FAC, and let's go bring in some volunteer, maybe slightly more technically savvy, franchisees that want to participate. And so that's, every brand is different, but the more engagement we get on the front end, the more likely it is that when it does roll out, there's less surprise, right? But you still see that where
they can have an impact in terms of like some of the
correct.
minor naming.
Exactly.
This deal stage.
And that's, again, this kind of speaks back to the benefit of a franchise system, right? If you bring in 10 franchisees, every one of them will have something unique about their business that the other 9 don't know, right? And so by bringing all of those in, you may not be able to address all of those day one, but it's good to know those on the front end so that you can roadmap those out and work to address those and add capabilities to support that. A lot of times our job is not so much add the checkbox and call it what they want. It's to figure out what they mean and what they're trying to solve by adding that checkbox, so that we can do it in a way that could be useful by all of our customers. And that's part of our kind of iterative philosophy that we've.
And then do you work hand in hand with like the franchisor's IT department?
Yeah. So we'll be engaged with, the operations team. If they have different brands may or may not have much in terms of kind of back technology, but if they do, then we obviously work closely with them. We work closely with the marketing team, and sometimes also kind of the franchise development side as well. Like, it's not unusual for a brand that's on ServiceMinder, they will bring in ServiceMinder as a part of the dog and pony show for why you should buy this brand versus another one, because look at all the cool stuff you can see and do.
Yeah, and you help, pretty much every facet of the business, operations,
yeah, that's
client service, sales.
Exactly. Yeah. In the vast majority of our brands, they're using 2 tools. They're using ServiceMinder and they're using QuickBooks Online.
It's perfect.
And that's it.
I would love to have the same thing. I don't know.
Well, we're working on Embedded Business Minder, but it's still in beta. So
information portal software. Right now,
exactly.
we must have like 12 different softwares that we're using across the company.
Yeah. We have some of the same problems as well, right? So we kind of abstract all that, right? It's like, well, what review tool do you want to use? Here's the 9 that we support. What payment gateway do you want to use? Here's the 11 that we support. In some cases it's easy. It's like, what accounting system do you want to use? You can use anything you want as long as it's QuickBooks Online, right? Here in the US, that's the predominant gorilla, so that's worked out well. There's some other platforms outside. But again, by us kind of taking care of those integrations and managing them from our side, from a franchisor perspective, it's largely a checkbox option to say, I want to use this or I want to use that.
And you've already pre-vetted these suppliers like Tableau that you're bringing in.
Yeah, and the majority of the ones that we have were brought to us by brands. That was kind of one of the things as we started onboarding brands and they saw what we could do, they would go, well, can you talk to this thing? Can you
integrate it in?
Send data over to that thing? It's like, yeah, we can figure that out. And if it's an industry standard tool that we can see value that would be useful for multiple brands, like review tools, right? Everybody, there's 100 out there, and we support not all of those, but we support ones that our brands wanted us to support. And so as we add one, that then enables the ability to make it easier for new people who are already using some of those to come in. Word of mouth is a big part of our early accidental strategy. I would like to, I'm not a marketing guy. That's why I hired somebody like Olivia, right? Because
that's still the most cost effective.
Exactly. And we tried to kind of tweak our model to kind of push that forward, but in the end, nobody's searching for us, and that's okay because people hear about us and talk about us, and so.
And a big thing is staying top of mind too in marketing, where if you could have the happiest client for ServiceMinder, but they're not always thinking about you because you
correct.
and everything's going super smooth, but
Yeah,
you're still in business. You want their referrals.
exactly. Yeah, and it goes both ways, but yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely a balancing act.
John, any concluding thoughts for franchisors, franchise suppliers out there?
I think the struggles that we see that brands that are looking for us, they've typically got either no systems in place or they've got things piecemeal together. So my advice is whether you use ServiceMinder or something else, try to focus on something that understands franchising, because the franchising business model is unique in a lot of different ways, and so it's very beneficial to work with somebody who understands your side of the equation, and has kind of built-in support for the things that franchisors need, and not just royalty reporting, but just kind of deployments and tracking engagement and right, all of those things, access, right? Like if you're on a tool that everybody has their own account, the franchisee can kick you out, and because they bought it and they signed up for it and they granted you access, but if they go rogue, they can kick you out, right? So that can't happen in a tool like ServiceMinder because it's built with franchising in mind. So that's probably the main advice I would do is if you're not doing anything, do something. And if you're going to do something, do something that has, the franchise component to support your long-term vision of your brand, because everybody wants to get bigger. And so if you have something that can support your business model natively, odds are you'll be more successful.
That makes sense. The risks are super high to be like the guinea pig of another platform or software
Yeah.
provider where they
Yeah.
don't understand the multi-unit aspect and how the
Yeah.
relationship is with the franchisor and franchisee, where maybe if you just have 2 locations, it's like, all right, let's roll the dice, let's do this. But if you're already at 200 plus, like huge risk there,
Exactly.
that doesn't go so
Yeah.
well.
And that's why those are the big projects, right? Because you're talking about basically changing out the infrastructure for 200 individually owned businesses. That's again not something you're gonna do on a weekend decision. You spend a lot of time planning and
I
getting ready
like
for
that.
that.
I'm gonna borrow that weekend decision versus what? What's
Exactly.
the
A weekend
what's the
decision
service?
is where are we going to go eat, what movie are we going to go see, what bottle of whiskey are we going to buy this weekend. That's a weekend decision. What platform am I going to run my entire brand on? You're going to want to spend a little time thinking that through.
That's a strategic. That's like a year.
Yeah, exactly.
That's well said.
Yeah.
Well, John, thanks again for joining us today. I really appreciate
No,
it.
thanks for having me. Had a good time. It
And
was
I'll
great
leave the
chatting with you.
contact of Olivia or whoever the best person is at ServiceMinder for brands that might be interested in signing up and having you as a provider. And
Yeah, reach out to Olivia for sure. And we're also pretty active on LinkedIn, so feel free to find us there and message us or whatever. Come to our website. We offer free demos. It's basically a discovery call. Hop on and we'll spend an hour. You tell us what your brand is and what kind of problems you're having, and we'll tell you whether we can fix it or not. And if we can, we'll show you how. And if not, we'll be happy to tell you that as well.
cool. Really appreciate it, John.
Thank you.